I'm Liliana Coutinho. I'm the curator of debates and talks at the Biennale Index 2024, the Biennale of Art and Technology. This year we have a large theme, the theme of coexistence. And when we speak about coexistence, we are speaking about art, technology, we are speaking about politics, we are speaking about a large ecology of coexistence. And in fact, the subject or the title of this conversation today, it's this one, Ecologies in plural of coexistence. And I have with me Frédéric Neyrat and Teresa Castro. Welcome and thank you very much that you have accepted to be here today with us. I will just do very brief presentations before we move to a conversation. So Frédéric Neyrat is a philosopher. He works in environmental humanities, contemporary theory, and media culture. He's a professor in the department, in the English department at the University of West Madison in the United States. He contributes and is also a curator for a platform. The name is Alienos, and I think we'll speak about it. It's a online platform on planetary humanities, but we'll have the chance to speak about it. Frédéric is also editor. It belongs to the editorial board at the magazines Links and at Multitudes. He published several books. I will just say 2 or 3 that perhaps we'll speak about them. One is Utopia, a manifest for a radical existentialism. Another, published in 2018, Unconstructable Earth, an ecology of separation. And another, published, I think that only in French, Linge noir de l'histoire, Cosmos et technique de l'afrofuturisme. Teresa Castro is an art historian, and she is associate professor in film studies at Université Sorbonne Nouvelle, and also a scholar, a research scholar at IRCAF, Institut de Recherche sur le cinéma et l'audiovisuel à Paris, and also in Lisbon and Isenova. Actually, Teresa, I think she's stopped a little bit teaching for 1 year, just to dive into the research at the Center Alexandre Coiret, Center of Research from CNRS. She published also a lot of essays, books, and research articulates the images, animism, cinema. We will speak about all of these now. I don't want to make these presentations too long, but reminding that the subject that brings us today here is the idea of coexistence, and that both of you, in your work, you address ecological concerns. I would like to start with 2 concepts that I think they are present in your work. 2 concepts that at the first sight we can think that they can be different paths of thought, but I think that there is an interesting articulation that we can do. One concept, it's the concept of symbiosis that Teresa Castro works a lot, and another is the concept of separation. I think that those 2 concepts are like key concepts in your way of thinking, and both of them, the way that I read your works, they are important also. They are a way also of expressing the possibility of creating relationships, of creating modes of coexistence. Can you speak a little bit about this. I know we are starting in a very general way about these two concepts, but it's because somehow they can, I think, that connect you and at the same time create a difference between two of you.
It's never easy to start.
That's true.
Yes, I think the last time we were in conversation with you, Liliana, we did talk a lot about symbiosis because I did work on lichens. And I tend to do, part of my work is actually related to the history of science. And so I was interested in the very history of symbiosis as a mode of coexistence that is not necessarily, I suppose, antagonistic with the idea of separation, according to Frédéric. I mean, we're talking about symbiosis and separation, I don't think are necessarily different. Or opposite. I mean, they are obviously different, but they are not necessarily at you know, different ends of the scale. And so symbiosis, which is of course an idea that has circulated a lot recently, is a way of thinking about, you know, the way in which different beings, different organisms work together in towards mutual benefices. And of course, the lichen as a being, which is a composite being made of mushrooms, bacteria, and algae, not always bacteria, but always a mushroom and an algae, is a very interesting example because it's a being that defies the notion of individuality. And it's about, of course, this sort of, as you were saying, a mode of coexistence that is absolutely essential for the survival of the different participants in this symbiotic association. And of course, this is, I think, a very interesting idea to think about a number of challenges that we face today with regards, of course, to the ecological crisis, but not only the ecological crisis, but because I think we are also going through a political crisis, and the very idea of coexistence is, of course, very important from that point of view. So it's interesting maybe to take the idea of symbiosis to think about what we can do and what different modalities we have to imagine different ways of being together. And I think this notion of imagination is also common to our very different works. But for me, I would make a link between this idea that the symbiosis is perhaps a way of forcing us sometimes to think about modes of coexistence in a very different way, because our imaginaries have been colonized by very competitive or antagonistic modes of coexistence, which doesn't really work as coexistence. So yes, drawing on, you know, the vegetal and the fungal kingdom, I started working on this idea of symbiosis, but it's really a sort of starting point to question a number of things about ourselves as humans, our relationships between humans, but also with non-humans or more than humans. And so I started, Frédéric. Up to you.
Perfectly. No, yeah, thank you so much. And I think you're right. We are looking to the same thing, like togetherness. You know, you pronounce this term at the beginning of what you have said. In the end, we are trying to think about the community, the being together, and symbiosis is a beautiful term that, as you say very well, compels us, forces us. It compels us to challenge the idea of the individual, these kinds of splits that prevent community from existing. So I totally agree that it's absolutely necessary to give to produce new ideas of the common. And I think it is exactly what you do, what you explain. Concerning the term of separation, just I want to situate the reason for which I decided at a very specific moment of my research to speak about separation as a dialectical concept. That is to say, for me, it is what I try to explain. Separation is the reason for which we try to communicate, right? So the goal in the end is to produce a community, a real community. And so I spoke about separation to insist on the fact that it's not a given. You know, even if you read newspapers, we hear about wars, we see that coexistence is not something obvious for a certain number of people. Alas, it should be obvious. It should be understood as an absolute necessity, but it's not the case. And so separation is maybe the name of a problem, maybe not the name of the solution, but the name of a problem. And this problem should lead us to think about symbiosis, about community, about being together, about togetherness. So separation for me, if I try to think the term coexistence, I like this term. Even when you pronounce this word, you have coexistence, you can immediately hear the fact that there are two words, coexistence. The passage from the co to existence, there is a gap actually. And you can put an hyphen between the prefix and the term existence. Coexistence means that if we pay attention to the word itself, like the cum that we can find in community, communication, communism, coexistence means a way to think existence as shaped by the co meaning with. So coexistence is a term inviting us to think existence not as an insulated form of life, but as something requiring togetherness, requiring a specific kind of relation. So existence shaped by the co, by the with. And so again, the simple fact to say that, I think, highlights the fact that, again, separation is our problem, what is in front of us. We need to deal with that. We need to create a coexistence. It's not given. What is given is a necessity of coexistence. What is not given is its implementation, its realization.
Yes. But it's interesting that you say that it is the problem, but I would like to relate also with this other term that you bring in your manifest, in your philosophical manifest, Utopia, where you make a plea for this notion of the outside, the idea that we need. So somehow the outside, that it's also part of this movement of separation, but of course, I'm not speaking about antagonisms and about, but really its dynamics, even your concepts of symbiosis and separation. It's a dynamic encounter. So in your book, you say that without utopia, without this non-place, without this outside. Know that it's a term that is important for you also. There is no world, there is no being in common, and no political coalition is possible. So it's also interesting that because it's also somehow this outside and the separation that allows a coalition. So there is at the same time a problem, but at the same time a key.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want say something about this, or
yeah, separation is first something that affects myself. I am severed from myself. I don't know exactly what I do. Sometimes I am very opaque to myself. So separation is first a way to think about a form of outsideness that is inside me. The outside is not something like it's a paradox in a way, but I am inhabited by a form of outsideness. That's why I am a stranger for myself. Every human person, and I would say maybe every living being is a kind of stranger for itself. Maybe there is a kind of strangeness at play in every cell, even maybe in a rock. Why not? So first, we need to take into account the fact that I am for myself a kind of enigma. I am not transparent. I am not a transparent being, right? And so this opacity, and maybe there is already a link with Edouard Glissant, this opacity is maybe a sort of, instead of considering this opacity, this inside opacity, this internal opacity, as an absolute obstacle, it might be maybe interesting to consider this opacity as maybe the essence of the common, the essence of community. Maybe we communicate because we are enigmatic people. When I say communicate, I use here the term communication, not as an exchange of information, right? I speak here about communication as something that as a process through which sometimes I can encounter someone else. Communication is rare. A real communication, authentic communication is rare. So I would say this inside opacity, this internal opacity, is a condition of possibility of a real communication.
Because I'm thinking about this idea of opacity and about this, about the idea of trouble and about the idea of encounters that this symbiotic that are also strange encounters somehow. That and I would like to know, how do you relate to this?
Yes, I actually like a lot the idea of opacity. I think, and there's a connection, of course, between opacity and the idea of the trouble, and I will go back to this. But I just wanted to add that I really like this idea of opacity because I do think that we live in this sort of tyranny of transparency or this fantasy, this, well, idea that everything should be visible, accessible, immediate, that we should understand everything. And I think this tension between opacity and transparency is extremely interesting. I was also wondering, I will go back to the question, but if this idea of the outside, and I'm going to say this in a not philosophical way, but for me, and of course, I've read Frédéric, and this is a different understanding of what he is suggesting. But I think the outside is absolutely necessary for us to keep on imagining, believing, and working at the idea that there are alternatives to what is being proposed to us as an absolute absence of alternatives. And I think opacity is essential here because opacity comes with a mystery. It comes with things that we do not know, with things that are not immediate, with things that are a challenge. And I think this is extremely necessary. But of course, to go back to what you were saying, it's true that again, when I was working on the idea of symbiosis, and I was obviously also reading Donna Haraway, and this idea of staying with the trouble is also, I think, a way of converging towards this, because staying with the trouble is staying with the problem, is cultivating the problem, is not avoiding complexity, difficulties, pain, but also joy, the joy of togetherness, the joy and complexity of togetherness. But it's something that is, by definition, unstable, that is by definition as well something that sometimes escapes us, and that is, for me, also perhaps related to what I understand opacity to be. I hope I'm not being too theoretical, but I do see connections. I do see connections between the idea of opacity and trouble, in the problem, you know.
Can I read
Yes.
from Edouard Glissant vis-à-vis what Teresa said?
Yes.
Because vis-à-vis opacity, there is it this one about coexistence? Yes. So it is in the Poétique de la Relation, and he says in English version, agreed not merely to the right to difference, but carrying this further, agree also to the right to opacity that is not and closer within an impenetrable autarky, but subsistence within an irreducible singularity. Opacities can coexist and converge, waving fabrics. So like really the idea of opacity is like converging, producing like a sort of matter, a sort of a web of life, right? So I think this sentence of Edouard Glissant is absolutely beautiful.
Yes, and the way that he speaks about fabrics and about this movement of doing a fabric. Well, it is. I was wondering, and Teresa, I think felt that you were being too theoretical, but when you were speaking, I was wondering about, because you work with images, you work with cinema, you work with what is visible also. So, and also it becomes accessible through images. So you are speaking about this kind of also tyranny of the being visible all the time, of transparency. And I was wondering, and I know that Frédéric also works with cinema, so in different ways. But how do you see this opacity operating in images and in cinema? I don't know if you can share, even if you want to evoke some examples or some. How do you see this? Because this way of using the techniques of cinema in order to somehow not show and enter in this field of opacity.
Yes, I mean, this could be, you know, a very long conversation, because, of course, cinema was historically thought of as a media of transparency, and there's a whole history of cinema working towards transparency, and this sort of myth of visibility, of making visible, is something that is still extremely present in terms of cinema theory. Which doesn't mean that cinema and other visual means like photography or etc. cannot work towards this idea of opacity and the trouble. And I think, I mean, I'm really, instead of giving like concrete examples of artists or filmmakers, if you think about the very idea of what is in the outer field, l'hors-champ, I don't remember how we say this in English, is the...
Off screen? No.
Well, le hors-champ, you will understand. Le hors-champ is really a way also of cultivating opacity. And I think that cinema, of course, is a medium of visibility, but it's also a medium that makes you aware of what it is not showing to you. And I mean, of course, the work around sound is also extremely interesting. So this is perhaps a possibility of thinking. I'm not always saying that hors-champ is always about opacity. It's not, but it can be about opacity.
Yes.
And of course, filmmakers and artists very often choose to film the world in ways that the world becomes strange for us. I mean, we are sometimes very surprised by what we see. We don't recognize things. The camera can be a way of caressing the world, of aggressing things. And I think this is all part of potential strategies to create opacity. and that's it. But maybe we will return to this later on. But I think cinema really, around the idea of the outer field, is perhaps a way, an interesting way, productive way to think about how to generate opacity and trouble the dictatorship of visibility, because very often it is about a dictatorship of visibility, and we can trouble it, I think.
I was also asking this because I think for both of you, this idea of working and of opening this faculty of imagination, and I was reading very recently some essays by Ursula K. Le Guin, and also she was speaking about Mary Shelley, who said that one of the most important faculties of the human being is the faculty of imagination, and that artists, writers, and for them science fiction writers, that Mary Shelley and Ursula K. Le Guin were science fiction and fantastic writers, and both of you, this philosophy, history, cinema are modes also of creating this perception that, as you said, Teresa, there are alternatives, and even this concept of outside can be a way of showing that there are alternatives to the systems that we are living in and to the imaginary that we are living in. So it's interesting that through images we can also create some breaks and open some places of breathing inside this system, this imaginary system where we are living. So I would like a little bit to move also this idea of this conversation about imagination also to this ecological but also political realm, because I know that this idea of catastrophe for Teresa Castro is something that it's an imaginary that we need to go away from it in order to open different possibilities. And I'm also thinking about Frédéric Neyrat, this work that you are doing also with others, with other thinkers, about how to change our political imagination and not to think how to move in a way that political, it's not like Klaus von Clausewitz said, that politics, it's a way of it's a way of doing war by other means. So I don't have here the sentence now, but it's this idea that politics, it's the continuation. It's the continuation of war by other means. So it's like if we are always in catastrophe, in the metaphor of a catastrophe, or in the metaphor of war, they are imaginaries, they constitute imaginaries that they are constantly informing our coexistence and our ways of doing politics, also, and of being together. So I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about this, and perhaps Frédéric about it.
Yeah, I tried to think together all the things that you have said, and so I maybe I found a way to do that. And to do that, I need like a concrete example. And the concrete example I have in my mind is related to a certain number of ongoing conflicts. These ongoing conflicts deal with the question of coexistence, right? That is to say, what is the opposite of coexistence? It is, if co means with, the opposite of coexistence is the idea, the dangerous fantasy, according to which existence might be without any kind of otherness. It's a dangerous fantasy because it's not possible, because the eradication and the annihilation of strangeness would require to annihilate myself, because I am a stranger for myself. So it's a suicidal fantasy, actually. But so, of course, when coexistence is impossible, the name of the absence of coexistence is war. War, that is to say, a situation in which it is either me or the other. If I survive, it means that the other will have been killed. So the otherness of the other will have been annihilated. In order to deactivate war, we need a counter imaginary. We need another another way to think politics. We need an image of peace. And it is super interesting, because I work on the question of war and peace for now several months. It is very interesting, the fact that when you try to ask someone, okay, what is your imaginary of peace? People either laugh or smile or cry or do not respond or are angry at you because you are speaking of peace instead of speaking of war. And what I realized is that we have many images associated to the notion, to what war is, but try to ask someone, okay, what is your imaginary of peace? And actually, what you can see is that at this place, there is a hole. There is a lack, an absolute lack, really an absolute lack of representations of what peace is. There's it's a pure real à la Lacan or à la Bataille. It's a pure hole, because it was maybe bombed too much. And so people have no images, like, or Walt Disney's images, maybe a white bird before it is burnt. So we need an imaginary, but it's not just that we have to produce images. We have to heal our imaginary. We have to heal. There is a kind of wound, in a way. As long as we will not have been able to understand this wound, I think there will be no possible counter-imaginary. So we need an imaginary of peace. We need to listen to the very few voices who advocate for peace. They are very rare, right? And there is a kind of suspicion about peace for excellent reasons. That is to say, peace is also a name thanks to which some colonial wars were led. The famous pacification used by colonial powers in the 19th century, to kill indigenous people. So it's a very dangerous concept, of course. It is also, peace can be the name of war. Peace can be the name of destruction, of killing. But that's true. That's absolutely true. But I really think that there is an absolute lack of imaginary at this specific place.
I like very much this idea of caring for the imaginaries. It's true that I'm really not the only person to talk about this, but it's true that when you work with cinema, you are very aware of this imaginary, very colonizing imaginary around the ecological catastrophe. And it's something that is, of course, been exploited by Hollywood films for a long time. And it's a very conservative imaginary. There's always, most of the times, a white male that comes to save at least the family unit, because it is also very often about saving at least, some institutions like the family that are understood to be like the last place where we can resist to everything that is changing. So I'm obviously very aware of this necessity to overcome these sort of very colonizing imaginaries that are absolutely paralyzing today. But I agree. I mean, I really like this idea that of course, very often the question is, people agree, yes, there is an imaginary of the catastrophe and we need to overcome this. And then the question is, okay, so what do we do? Is there a user's manual to change the imaginary? There isn't, okay? There isn't. And so I think in the present moment, what we actually can do is to care for other imaginaries, is to try and heal, or at least acknowledge that there is a wound and there is actually a lot of suffering around this lack of imaginaries. So I think that tending to this, again, there are many different possibilities of doing this, and there really is not a usual's manual. I mean, we need, every case is a case, and this is precisely what's exciting with imagination, is that one answer in this at a specific moment with regards to something is not necessarily the best answer to another case. But I was thinking, I mean, this came to my mind. It's not an example that comes from cinema, but because you were mentioning writers and science fiction writers, there is a word that has started to circulate in the last couple of years that I think is a very interesting word in terms of political imaginaries. And it's a word that comes from poetry. It was first a British poet that invented this word in a poem. And it's the idea of the biotariat. It's not the proletariat, it's the biotariat. And so le biotariat, biotariado, refers to the exploited life on the planet, and it brings together human proletarians, the majority of animals and plants, soil, minerals, everything from forests to sea turtles to Bangladeshi workers. And I think this is a very, of course, this to think seriously about the idea of the biotariat and about a union of the biotariat is very challenging in political terms. And I can see lots of objections to this idea. But for me, it's a very productive idea. And again, it's something that comes from poetry. And I like to think that some films tell stories about the biotariat.
Thank you for bringing this this concept, and I want to go to this idea of to care for other imaginaries, but a little bit after. First, I would like to use these two expressions that Teresa you used, this user's manual. There are no user's manual. And when you said this, I immediately thought about your book, Frédéric, The Unconstructable Earth, and this idea that we are looking for users' manual to technical fix this wound. But this is perhaps one of the biggest problems, that this idea of delegating our capacity of healing the wound to this technological aspect of our experience. It's like if it becomes too too dominant, and in your book you somehow criticizing this techno-solutionism, techno-fix perspective. I think that you also it's also a book where you defend an ecology of separation. It's the second part of the title, but it seems that it's this way of looking always for a user's manual in order to fix something is also a way of killing otherness. So how can you tell us something about this? And I was thinking also about this word biotariat, because biotariat, perhaps they are those who are also working with you in the defending an unconstructable earth also. So they are perhaps your allies on this.
So I don't know who speaks first. Teresa, me? I don't know, whoever.
Perhaps Frédéric now.
Okay. I think, yeah. Biotariat, yes. We are in this moment in which, at the same time, we know that we cannot lean any longer on a certain number of political representations. We know that there is no one subject with a capital S able to lead history, because Biotaria is a way to replace proletariat. The proletarian subject who was supposed to be able to revolutionize the situation and to break with capitalism. And for many reasons, I'm not going to discuss that now, I guess, but this subject is not any longer supposed to be the leading subject of history. And so we think about a possible substitute, let's say. Biotaria, some people after Bruno Latour speak about les terrestres, the terrestrials. It's another way to think about a subject with a capital S. In a book that might be published in January 2025 at Liliana Quilibert, I speak about planetaria, another possibility. So the difficulty when we do that, and I try to do that too, and we are many people trying to do that, is that if we create a sort of master signifier able to speak about everything and everyone, of course we are going to erase some, not some separations, but some gender, class, and racial differences. And so I have no solution about that, because in a way we have to be very careful, as we know, when we say us, we say we, when we say nous, right? Because, okay, what is this us? What is this collectivity? But at the same time, I think we are also suffering from the incapacity to say we. I mean, it's a contradiction of our time. I'm not able to solve it. One possibility maybe is to follow like something like Munoz says in Cruising Utopia, when he says that the queer community is to come, right? That is to say, to imagine this we as not something given, but as something to come, right? It's not, because of course, to imagine a possible subject of history, we need also to imagine the conditions thanks to which some racial violence would have ceased, would have stopped, right? So I try to say that we have at the same time to imagine something else and to be careful with our imaginary. I say that and I keep doing that, okay? It's not like, it's not a moral, like I keep saying that we need to imagine, we need to change our imaginary. Maybe to continue on this line, just a very little thing. There is one way to imagine that only adds a new image. We have a set of images, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to add something else, to add another image, to add another possibility to existing possibilities. I think that when we do that, I do that, we all do that, it's not enough. I think there is another way to think imagination as that which begins with a negation, right? If I want to invent a new imaginary, I first need to negate the existing world. So I think it is interesting to think negation and imagination as the two sides of the same coin, right? And I think this coin is called utopia. If utopia is not just an addition to the existing world, but really a way to rethink this world, then utopia has to begin with a kind of negativity. Even if at the core of this negation, there is an affirmation, what we want, what we need. So it was a little bit abstract, but at least I wanted to say that right now.
The kind of absence somehow also, this negativity, it can create a space of absence.
Yeah, yeah, a way to, because I'm suspicious with the idea that we just need another, an alternative. We can always every morning imagine an alternative, another world, but again, if this world, maybe there is also a dangerous, side of coexistence that we need to address, right? But I'm thinking out loud.
Teresa.
No, I can add a few things, but I was just listening to Frédéric. I also thought of a quote by Hannah Arendt, where she says that we should train our imagination to go visiting. And so the imagination is to go visiting. Maybe it's going towards the outside, as you say. And just to return quickly to the biotaria, or the biotariate, it's just an example of a word that I found in a poem that for me created something in my mind. And I'm not saying that this is, a proposal that that I'm working on at the moment. It's not the case. I just think that, also to go back to the question of arts, the writing, films, images, even though there is not a usuals manual, I don't believe there is one. It's not about being prescriptive. Precisely, it's the opposite. We need to find new ways of doing things. But what I'm saying is that fortunately, I still find, here and there, things that are for me productive. And I think that can be the starting point of very useful conversations, very thought-provoking conversations, very urgent conversations that we also need to have. Okay, so just to be clear about this, but to phrase things in a different way and using maybe another word that is very popular these days. We are also talking about decolonizing the imaginaries. And of course, decolonization is a process. I mean, one doesn't wake up in the morning decolonized. And it's impossible to fully decolonize. I mean, I think it's Eduardo Viveiros de Castro who says that thought itself is a means of colonization. So, it's a process, and in a way, it's a process that is meant to fail because it's never ending. But that's not the point. It's just we need to engage in this decolonization, or to frame it again in different terms, in strategies of caring, of regenerating, of healing. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose we can say things in different manners, of course. This always engages different levels of discussion, but yeah, that's it.
And Teresa, I was not critical about you. I was critical about me, when I was discussing that, because I was thinking about this term, and I totally agree with you. Vis-a-vis this, my little platform, Alienocene, the subtitle, the first outer national, I stole that, or I took that, I borrowed that from Peter Gizzi's poetry. So like l'externational in French. So absolutely, like there are some words, some signifiers that like invite us to think and to visit. And I love the reference to Hannah Arendt that you have done, Teresa.
And these are thinking about this idea of visiting others, visiting the outside, and this idea of decolonizing as a process. It came to my mind the importance also of animism for you, Teresa, and also your book, Frédéric, where you relate to the concept of Afrofuturism. So I wonder if these are also ways of visiting these outsides and to work with it. So I'd like to know a little bit more about your relationship, for instance, Frédéric, with this idea of afrofuturism. There you have this book, L'âge noir de l'histoire, Cosmos et techniques de l'afrofuturisme. And you just spoke some minutes ago about this idea that we need also in history to create the conditions of emergence of the subjects, of those subjects that were perhaps but not understood as subjects. So how do you relate these thoughts about the outside and with this idea of Afrofuturism? How do you visit it?
No, I was thinking about what Teresa said about decolonizing our own imaginary, and I was not sure to write this little book about Afrofuturism because I am a wide subject. You know, I speak about that a little bit in the introduction, not enough. I think I didn't do a great job at this level. I should have been more clear. I should have spoken more about my whiteness, but you know, step by step, I try to be less stupid about that. And so the idea was, okay, there is this absolute incredible way to rethink technology, to rethink history, to rethink the notion of apocalypse, to rethink the Anthropocene that I found in Afrofuturism, musicians, painters, writers, poets. And really, like, it blew my mind. So I thought that it might be interesting for me to say something about that, to create a combination, an arrangement, a cyborg text able to deal with, at the same time, Afrofuturism and the philosophy of German philosopher Walter Benjamin. So there is this effect that is this book. And to return to your question about technology, I think that what I learned many things from Afrofuturist artists and thinkers, but what I learned is the absolute necessity to rethink technology. Let's go back to the question of, you know, the ecological way of thinking and the technofix, the idea that we could fix our ecological problems thanks to magic, magical technology. One way to deal with that and to say, okay, basically our problems are related to technology, so we need to get rid of technology to return to like rural and pastoral and natural communities, like isolated communities. I think it's too much. What we need to do is to criticize the actual form, the actual shape of technology, that is to say extractivist technology, colonial and neo-colonial technology. Technology whose function, to return to what something that Teresa was also saying, a technology whose function is to exploit our attention, right? And to turn us into transparent machines, right? So this technology should be, let's say, abolished, period, right? Instead of that, we need another kind of technology. For example, or like to begin this discussion or to just begin to think about that, a technology whose function will be to create mediations. And in a way, in this sense, possibilities for coexistence. Maybe the hyphen between co and existence might be informed by technology, right? Instead of using technology in order to exploit existence and to turn the co, the cum, the with into social networks, we could imagine technology as a technique of existence, something enabling a certain number of relations between the different living forms that coexist on Earth.
Thank you for bringing this, because this will be also the focus of two other debates in this program. One with Ellen Lima Wasu, who is from Wasu people and indigenous people in Brazil, and she worked with this idea of technology, but from the this indigenous perspective. And also this technology that exists in forests and in the sociability between in the coexistence between forests and with everything that exists within a forest and beings. So this is something that will resonate also in other debates. So, and I'm really interested in this shift also. And Teresa, yes.
Can I just add something, because Frédéric was saying a couple of things that in a way are related to the current work that I'm doing. And it's a way of talking about animism and then moving on towards other things. It's true that I've done a lot of work on cinema as an animistic technology, because there is a whole tradition since the 1910s of talking about cinema as animistic. And it's also a discourse that was interested in the spectator, because the idea was that the film spectator was transformed by cinema and became savage or childlike, and there was a lot of work on this. And so I was interested in this idea because, of course, such a modern technology was being envisaged as something described at the beginning of the 20th century as the sort of, perfect definition of what uncivilization was or the wild was. So I thought this was actually very dialectical, and I'm also interested in this idea of dialectics. But, Frédéric was talking about extractivist technology, and the truth is that cinema and photography are very concretely extractivist technologies. I mean, they are based on the extraction of minerals, even today around, and we cannot avoid this. So I think at a certain point, also because I was working a lot on plants and on this idea that it's very, important to me, that some images are actually means of imagining a different, a way of caring for the world. So this was very important for me, but I also wanted to avoid a form not of techno-solutionism, but of cine-solutionism. I mean, thinking that film can all of a sudden regenerate all the imaginaries and then everything ends up well, like in a Walt Disney film. No, I mean, staying with the trouble is also acknowledging this very paradoxical, contradictory, and complex, troubled history of cinema and photography as extractivist technologies, as capitalist technologies, as technologies that are really taking part in the ecological crisis and in the political crisis. So this is another way of staying with the trouble. And again, I'm not saying that I found a way to answer this, but staying with the trouble, it is at least acknowledging and trying to make coexist these two aspects of the problem. That's it.
Thank you, Teresa, because you moved also to a place where I wanted to go in your work, that is related also with this performance conference that you did last year, Conspirations.
What is conference?
Sorry, it's a performance.
What was it, this conference?
Okay,
it's what I can show a little bit, just one, it's a 1 minute images, and then you can speak a little bit like that. We can have something to grasp. So I'll just share here the window.
Portugal é a cova do lítio da União Europeia. A cova do lítio, União Europeia, Portugal é lítio! Rui, desculpa, para aí a música. Desculpa, podes parar? Ok. Uma pequena interrupção. Só para explicar que Portugal não pode ser o Vale do Lítio da União Europeia, porque Vale do Lítio é marca registada no Brasil.
So conspiracies was the result of this collective residence that I did in Fundão, which is a city in Portugal, in the interior towards the Spanish frontier. And so there was a collective residence organized by a collective known as Terra Batida, which is a group of people who works on ecological conflicts in Portugal. And so we had this 2-week residence in this place, which is a very, again, troubled place because it's a region with a very strong mining history, tungsten mines that were extremely important throughout the 20th century. And today there are lithium explorations around Fundão. It's also a place known for its massive production of cherries. Everybody in Portugal knows the Fundão cherries, which is a fairly recent invention of the region to try and market, well, a regional product. Also a region with lots of pines that was touched by very wildfires in recent years. A region that is very depopulated because it's in the interior. And so in the Fundão, they try to attract foreigners by creating digital and IT hubs. And so this is a place where lots of things were happening. And I was a bit confused because I didn't know what to do with so many things happening. And I actually became interested in something that Frédéric has also worked on, which is the idea that everything is connected. Everything was connected in Fundão. I mean, the mining history is connected to the fascist landscape, modernist fascist landscape, when you know, the wheat campaign in Portugal completely changed the landscape. Everything seemed connected. And I was wondering, because we needed to do something after this collective residence, also because I'm an academic, I didn't really want to write yet another text about interconnectedness. And so, because interconnectedness is not only a key notion of ecological thought, but also something that is very important to conspiracy theories. I did a conspirational conference where everything is connected. And so the starting point of the conference is actually something that happened to us when we arrived in Fundão, which is also a region in Portugal where you have lots of UFO sightings. We saw Starlink by Elon, you know, the Elon Musk satellites. Actually, we saw them on the sky. And the first time we saw them, we really could not understand what we were seeing. And so being in this, you know, small city, in this really abandoned region of Portugal that at the same time is totally crossed by many of the dynamics of globalization today and many of the difficulties that come with that. And seeing Elon Musk set Starlinks on the sky is the sort of starting point of this conference performance, because of course I'm not talking as an academic, but I am feeding this idea that everything is connected. and the idea of also of uncertainty that is there, that the absence of, the absence of truth. Where is the truth? And so it was also a way, I think, of questioning my own position as an academic. I mean, should we keep on talking about the same things in the same manner? So it was something that I wanted to ask myself.
Fascinating.
Frédéric, yes. I wonder if your platform, the Alienocene Journal of the First International, it's not always also a way of speaking in a different way. You both are academic, but I think that you both look also for other means, also not only through writing, also through writing, because in this platform, Alienocene, there are essays that are not academic essays, but they also deal with fiction. You have videos, images, sound. So there is also this aesthetic and aesthesis dimension, the dimension of the aesthesis, that it's important also to work this faculty of imagination that I think that you both are dealing with it. So I don't know if you could speak, and I was listening Teresa speaking about Starlink, and I was thinking about perhaps your next book, Planetary Condition, this dialogue that you do between Earth or planet and also the astronomical dimension. So how do you resonate with all of this?
Recently, I gave a talk. It was in Germany. It was a symposium related to the work of Jean-Luc Nancy. And the title of my talk was Mechanical Angels. It was about satellites. And actually, it's also a chapter of my Planetary Condition book. So, as you know, the question I had in this chapter or talk was, is it possible to use satellites not like Elon Musk does, And so to reimagine satellite, because satellite actually, the etymology of the term means something like safeguard. So a satellite is first something that is supposed to take care of us. So it's another way to speak about care in a way. And so I was playing with that. And again, as a way not to refuse this technology, but to refuse this capitalist utilization as something that in the end is used in order to facilitate and to accelerate the capacity of gamers to play more quickly with so like something that is a foundation of surveillance society or surveillance capitalism. So so I don't know what I wanted to say with that at all, because it's about this Starlink thing and
I was also wondering about this connection with fiction, between philosophy, theory, and fiction, that I see also in Alienocene. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to speak about Alienocene. I'm still thinking about coexistence. So maybe I could say that Alienocene is a cheap platform whose function is to create a coexistence between different media. Like, yes, as you said, sounds, images, text. There is a large part of this platform devoted to theory fiction. So precisely a way to challenge what theory or philosophy is supposed to be, and to challenge the territory of fiction, and to find a way to think them together, or to think how each of them can challenge the other one, how theory can be a way to do fiction, and how fiction can be a way to do theory. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm happy to speak more about that. Alienocene, of course, with the central idea of strangeness, right? The idea of we were speaking before about opacity, and I like the term alien. And when I write in French, I keep the term alien. I put that in italics because there is precisely a sort of indeterminacy. The alien is the stranger. It is it can be a terrestrial being, like I am an alien resident in the US, for example, so I am a kind of alien. The alien is also the extraterrestrial being. So the term alien for me is a way to blur the distinction between the terrestrial and the extraterrestrial, or to produce a dialectical relation between them. And in the planetary condition, I insist on the fact that there is no terrestriality without an extraterrestriality. The more I think about the Earth, the more I am compelled to consider the Earth as a cosmological entity, as a cosmological formation. So the goal of the planetary condition is to do that, to rethink our imaginary of the Earth as something else than Gaia. Not against the word Gaia, but I think the term Gaia is, in the end, a geocentric way to think the Earth. So maybe I try to think the coexistence of planets,
Yes.
and the fact that so it's a way for me to take a sort of distance vis-à-vis the ecological discourse, or maybe to produce an ecologization of the cosmos. There is a chapter in this book devoted to Galileo Galilei, and I said something like Galilei, first ecologist. And I interpret Galileo Galilei's cosmology as an ecological way of thinking. So I try to produce a dialectical system of thought, thanks to which it's possible to produce an ecology of the cosmos and a cosmologization of ecology. But to do that, to do this move, it's necessary to really question the geocentrism of the ecological thought. I am still surprised by how it is difficult for ecological thinkers to think about the outside. Like Bruno Latour was absolutely unable to symbolize the outside. Was for him really like no outside, we are inside. And so yes, maybe coexistence has also to be a cosmological notion.
Yes, the image that I have now is that we started with ecologies of coexistence, political ecologies of coexistence, earthly ecologies of coexistence, and then we amplified it from our cosmological perspective. We are arriving to the end of 1 hour, but I would like to ask if you want to add something also, Teresa, if you want to add something also to this large view that we arrived now in ecologies of coexistence, or Teresa or Frédéric.
I spoke too much. Teresa, please.
I also spoke too much. I mean, I don't know. There are many. I take many things from this conversation, but I think one of the most precious is really what you suggested about taking care of imaginaries. And I didn't actually answer about imaginaries of peace, but we can have a conversation on this, the two of us. But I really like this idea of us as tending to this, trying to heal the wound, caring for, regenerating. So I think this is a really beautiful idea.
I like the idea of regeneration. It is something that I didn't think enough. And I think there is a book of, what is her name? Emily Ash, that was just published, right? About like, it's something about generation against production. I think it is a very interesting idea. And what you said about regeneration makes me think right now it opens the door to different metaphors, and like regeneration understood also as a regeneration of organs, a regeneration of what was cut. And so plasticity and Catherine Malabou's philosophy. So I see many doors thanks to what you have said, Teresa, thanks to your questions. Liliana.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's good to end with lots of doors open and to think that we and you can continue the conversation. So thank you very much also for your generosity. So we will end here and hope to see you in another occasion. Thank you.